All right, so the hands are something that I like to do in a separate file. That way I can export it out, and if I spend a lot of time on this and I make a really good hand, I can just reuse this hand. As long as my character has a thumb and 4 fingers, I can reuse this hand on all of my characters, at least as a starting point, and I can kind of manipulate it and shape it how I want. So what I've done here is I've just brought in kind of a bottom view of a hand to use as an orthographic view. And that's all I'm really going to use at this point, just that, and I'm probably going to go back and forth between Google image search and just look at hand reference. I'm going to be looking at my own hand from different angles and so on. So that's all you really need. I'm going to start with the sort of palm of the hand, or the actual hand itself, and then I will model a finger, and I'm basically just going to duplicate that finger and even use a part of that finger for the thumb. So I'll probably time lapse some of this stuff, but for the most part, starting out here, all I really want to do is just make a cube and just start to kind of shape it out like a hand. Now, we do have some interesting stuff going on here with the thumb, and I'll kind of talk about that and how I want to deal with the thumb as opposed to how I'd want to deal with the hands. But at least for the first part of this, I'm just going to shape out this cube. I want to look at it from all points of view, even the front and side and perspective view. Kind of shape this like a hand would be shaped. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and add in some divisions in between the fingers, where the fingers would be. And then I can shape this out a little bit. One kind of difficult thing when it comes to modeling hands is getting it to connect up to the arm correctly. So I think one thing that people kind of tend to forget when they're connecting a hand to the arm is the wrist. And it's almost like a separate little object in itself, or separate part of the arm in itself. So it's not, it's not a part of the arm, it's not a part of the hand. So it's something that you have to kind of model in as you connect them up, and you have to kind of anticipate modeling that. So, but we'll get to that whenever I get to actually connecting the hand with the arm. So I'm just kind of, it might help if I'm in kind of wireframe view, but I'm just kind of moving this geometry around a little bit at this point to get it to kind of look at the hand, or look like the hand. Now what I'm going to do with the thumb is actually extrude out and do some interesting things with that. So we'll look at that when we get to it. So I have something like that. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different on the back side than it is on the front side. So I can kind of keep that in mind. The front side of the hand is going to be a little bit more angled. And you have the palm here that's going to come down like that. And the fingers. So at this point I'm trying to get just like a general shape of the hand. occasionally I can look at it, you know, right now it's not going to look like much, but occasionally I can look at it smooth. I can go ahead and add an edge loop here and maybe widen that out a little bit. It's important to kind of keep in your brain which way this is working, which way this is facing. So the thumb's going to come out of here, and this is the palm. So this is where I'm working here. It might be a little bit easier to understand if I go ahead and move these up. So that way just both sides don't look the same from my different views. So this is going to be the thumb, so of course I'm going to bring these down quite a bit here, and I'll maybe bring these down a little bit too. So okay, so let's I'm going to make a spot for the thumb but not quite model it in yet. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually I'm going to add in another sort of edge loop here that goes around like this. And for now I'm just going to like triangle that off. So for the thumb, basically what I'm going to do is select these four faces here and extrude them out. And come in here and rearrange some of these so kind of matches up with my reference. So I'm going to create something like this, and then basically I'm going to attach one of the fingers to this to create the thumb. So that's kind of sort of how I'm going to go about making the thumb. So at this point I can think about, okay, so my wrist is here, my arm is going to connect here at some point. I could probably go and round out this a little bit to anticipate where the wrist is going to be. Something like that, and then I can delete these faces here because they're going to connect to the arm. So, and then I can actually delete some of these in here, just like I did with the toes, to connect up the fingers. I do want to kind of anticipate the same way I did with the toes. I want to make some geometry in here, and you know, whenever I add new geometry, I always want to go in and make sure it's sort of matching. Kind of want to go in and touch every single vertice, move it around, because if you don't go in and try to make your geometry flow correctly, it's just not going to look organic. It's not going to look right. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to align these vertices with like the leftmost part of the finger, each finger, and that's just really a decision that I'm making on the fly. There's no rhyme or reason why I'm choosing the left and not the right. And then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to make a little triangle here. And if you remember with the foot, I did this so I could delete these faces and still have a little gap in between where the fingers are going to be. And I can jump over to this view to make sure they're kind of lined up correctly, which actually they're all pretty good. You know, I could probably pull these forward a little bit, round them out, and I have to do some. I have to definitely do some stuff there to make that look right. So obviously I want my fingers to look round, so I'm going to go and do something like that. To all of them, I'm going to make the actual finger itself out of a cube and then attach it. So at this point I can come in and I can just delete these faces here to kind of get ready for where those fingers are going to attach. I could probably go ahead and delete these two faces too, where the thumb will attach. And then once I smooth it, at this point I can kind of get an idea of how that's going to look. So I have kind of the palm is there a little bit. I could probably go in and add some more geometry to emphasize the palm. But for the most part, I think what I have looks pretty good. And then from this side, I'm definitely going to need some more geometry to kind of emphasize the finger bones that are actually like inside the hand. But for the most part, this is okay for a starting point of having something to kind of connect two fingers once I have them. So the fingers themselves, I'm going to just start with another cube, and I'm just going to basically model this finger, and then duplicate that in order to make these other fingers. So just make a cube. And pretty simple enough, I can just go ahead and make that shape there. And then add divisions where I need them. I can jump over here to my perspective view or my side view. Now I'm kind of guessing that my character is going to have fairly long fingers, so I'm not worrying about that at the moment. I can always go in and change them when I get to that point. So I'll go ahead and add another division there, another one there. And basically this will let me kind of round out the finger itself. So I can select these two edges, scale them in a little bit, select these two edges, scale them in a little bit, move them around a little, and I can move them up. And that will basically just give me a little bit more of a finger shape there. So something like that. If I smooth that, it doesn't really look like a finger at this point, but it's kind of getting there. It's kind of that round shape. I can delete these interior faces that I'm not going to need because I'm going to connect that to the hand eventually. So for the knuckle, I'm not going to worry too much about this knuckle at the moment because I'll try to make that once I connect the finger to the hand. But the other knuckles here I will kind of work on. So I'm going to go ahead and add in another division kind of in between all of those guys. And then just sort of the same way I did the bicep and sort of made my own little edge loop, I can do that with my knuckles as well. So I can come in and just kind of cut in here, cut a little diamond shape. And that didn't work. And then basically what I'm going to have is a round edge loop. So if I wanted to add an edge loop in here, I now have an edge loop there. So probably even go ahead and do that for that one. I did go ahead and add a move grab tool to my shelf there. So all right, well, seems like I managed to crash Maya without saving. So what I have now is slightly different than what I had before. But for the most part, all the geometry is the same. I think with the exception of like having, I think before I had an edge that went off, kind of triangled off from here and went down, and I just went ahead here and made that another edge loop. But for the most part, everything else is the same. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and start tweaking this. Again, using your sculpt tools are very helpful here. I like to have on wireframe. And I think in this case my brush size is very, very large. So, or maybe it's, let's see, let me zoom out here. Could be very tiny or very large. It's very large. So I think my hand in this case is kind of small. So really like this for like smoothing out. You know, I kind of made that knuckle there and it just didn't look natural. So going in and smoothing that out might make it look a little bit better. You definitely want to like look at your own hands. You know, the best reference you can have at this point is when you're modeling a human-like character, the best reference you can have is yourself. So I think looking at your hand or looking at pictures of someone else's hands is very helpful when modeling a hand. So starting to look a little bit like a finger. I still think that knuckle looks kind of weird. So like definitely going in with the grab and smooth tool and kind of smoothing that stuff out. Moving it around is going to make a huge difference there. So I have that knuckle, and then of course I have another knuckle right below that. So I can go the same route of making that geometry. Usually what I do when I make that diamond shape and then connect those ingons so they're no longer ingons and they're all quads, is then I'll go in and select every other vertice like that and then just scale out, and that basically rounds that out a little bit. So then I can select all of those guys. Oops. Kind of move them up a little bit to emphasize that knuckle, and then maybe make an outer edge loop there. And you know, in some cases they're going to look kind of funky. You know, I definitely over exaggerated that, so I want to go in now and smooth that out a little bit. But the key is having the geometry in the right, kind of having your geometry flow correctly, and then it's naturally going to want to kind of be in that right spot whenever you go to smooth it out. So like this area here where it kind of looked a little square, you can smooth that out and you know, it'll look a little bit different. So finger looks a little bit weird at this point. I think overall it may be too wide this way, so I could just scale that in and maybe move it down a little bit. We'll go in from my try to reshape this a little bit here from this angle from my orthographic views. You really want to kind of spend time getting one good finger, and then you're basically just going to use that finger to make all of your other fingers. So it's not going to be, you know, once you get that one good finger down, the rest, the other 3 fingers here are going to be pretty much a breeze. And I'll probably manipulate these a little bit whenever I go to touch everything up, just because my character is kind of long and lanky. So he's going to have some really long fingers. So I'll probably go in and kind of manipulate them a little bit with my grab tool once I have them attached to the body. But for now, I think what I have is okay. I could probably go in and add a couple more edge loops here and here, here and here, to kind of emphasize this crease on the underside of the finger. And that may even give me a little extra detail that I can put into the knuckles there once I smooth that out a little bit. I tend to, whenever I'm using these sculpting tools, I tend to kind of like over exaggerate, and then I'll bring it back down by smoothing it out a little bit. That's just kind of the way I work, I guess. So it's getting there. Probably go in with these guys and bring them out quite a bit. So with the exception of a few little minor details, you know, you always want to look at things from all angles. Starting to look like a finger. Now, as far as the fingernail goes, you can't, you know, that's completely up to you whether you want to model in your fingernails or make them a separate thing. In this case, I feel like my character is kind of stylized, so I'm not really going to model in the fingernails. If I wanted to, basically, let me go ahead and save this so I can back up, because I don't think I'm going to have, we'll see, I don't know, maybe we will put in fingernails. So just kind of make some extra geometry for a fingernail. And what I can do is grab this and extrude down, and that basically makes the bed for the fingernail. And obviously I'd want to take this geometry and kind of do something with it. So that kind of makes a fingernail bed for you. And then you can take these two polygons, extrude them up, and that makes the fingernail itself. Like that. And then if you want to bring the fingernail out some, you can take these two and extrude them out. So that's how I would manage fingernail. You know, if you have like a character with like long, sharp fingernails, you can extrude them out quite a bit. But my character, I don't think I'm gonna give him fingernails. I think I'm gonna keep him pretty stylized with no fingernails, or maybe just if I back up to where he just had like a fingernail bed, might be good. So maybe just something like that, and then I can texture like a little bit of a fingernail on there for him. So for the most part, that's it. I do think they're kind of a little flat or a little fat at this point, so go in and kind of adjust them a little bit. I don't know if I have them shaped quite right, so that may be just a matter of going in with my smooth and maybe smoothing out some of those areas. This is where it's going to be very helpful to look at reference of all different kinds, whether it be just using your own hand or looking at a bunch of images of fingers. I kind of have fat, stubby fingers, so not really the kind of fingers that I want for this character, but I can still get the gist of how I want that geometry to flow and the shape. It's just going to be a lot more subtle because he's going to have really long fingers. And again, I'm probably going to change this up quite a bit, you know, in this next sort of, you know, after I connect the hand and after I do all that stuff, connecting the fingers to the hand and connecting the hand to the arm. I'll probably kind of manipulate things a little bit, but for the most part, that is how the fingers are going to work. So for this next part, I'm just going to go in and duplicate them and attach them to the hand. I'll do a time lapse for this part, so I probably won't talk. I'll probably just put on some music and zone out and kind of work on this for a little while, and then we'll get to how to deal with the thumb. Okay, so I got all the fingers attached. As you could see, I used like merge or target weld. I use merge, and I just use the G key to like G is basically repeat your last action, so I use that a little bit. And then towards the end here, I've been using my grab and sculpt tool. In this case, I turned off show wireframe just because it was making it kind of hard to see how the geometry flowed. So I think it was kind of benefiting me a little better to have that off than on. So that's basically it. I have 4 fingers there. I have, the makings of a decent hand. There's probably some things that I could tweak for sure, but at this point, I think that this is a long enough video, and we can move on in the next video to creating the thumb.